Agenda item 1, discussion and possible action regarding utilizing service of the Urban Land Institute. Several weeks ago, Melissa Price, Mike Farrar, Gary Neese, and I went down to the Urban Land Institute, ULI, and met with the staff there and several people who work with the ULI. Out of that meeting, we learned that the ULI does not give recommendations on specific projects. However, they did recommend to us a thing called a CAP, which is a program that they run that seemed very interesting to us. When I conclude a few remarks, I'll ask the others to comment on this. It sounded like a good idea. About a week ago, Gary Neese and I met with Elliot Pollock, who works with the ULI. He sent a letter that was included in your packet and was forwarded to you. Fundamentally, Elliot Pollock concurred with what we're doing. He's very supportive of where we are and our direction. Melissa, Mike, Gary, comments on the ULI?
Well, I thought it was a very productive meeting. I enjoyed meeting with them, and it was ironic to see, gosh, what is his name? He's on the ASU film, Duke Ryder. So I knew Duke from a while back, and we're mutual friends. It was nice to see him on the panel. I happen to know Elliot Pollock as well, so when I got the letter, I gave Elliot a call and to talk about the letter. And he says, Mike, my letter is not intended to be really a roadmap for the company. And I don't know what would be best in terms of amount of money spent. He says, but what I was trying to convey was that you're on the right track, that there should be, the town should be looking at some synergy in the center. But he says, you really should consider, you really don't know what you're doing, is what he told me. He says, you really need to bring on someone that has the expertise, that can design a roadmap for you in the future, that will identify that. And he says, obviously it's something that his company can do. He says he recommended an RFP that he would put out. Urban Land Institute might not be the best because they don't really address specific items, but Elliot says there are companies that do. He says we happen to do that as well. So while the letter was endorsing the fact that we're looking to bring things into the center, Elliot made it clear to me that, Mike, this is not my final conclusion. There might be some other opportunities available for you. I was just saying, trying to communicate again, that you're taking those steps. But you really need to have a plan set forth for the town that's done by a third-party, independent company that has the experience and expertise in that. So I just wanted to share that conversation with everyone.
Mayor, you and Gary went down there. What did he exactly tell you?
Well, maybe we should ask Gary and Melissa for their comments.
I think Elliot was very candid. We had a discussion about our infrastructure and positioning our infrastructure to attract people. And he said you're 100% accurate there. You need to invest in your infrastructure. That's what you own, that's your asset. And your asset, you have to evaluate how to attract people. He said, obviously, shade and a splash pad, you're using the best practices that are being used by the industry today. And he said, you're hitting the bullseye with this stuff. This is what you should be doing. So I find it interesting, and we can have Elliot come up here and
Let's do because
Okay.
you know while you know again it has to. I don't think anyone's
Because
really
the message
contesting the
that we
idea
heard-
that we put shading on the amphitheater or that we have a splash pad. I think the concern is the allocation and how big do you go with, you know, from the scale from a water fountain to a water park. What's really required? And Elliot made it real clear to me, Mike, I don't know. It needs to be analyzed. You need to look at how many people you think will come, you'll attract to the splash pad. That will determine the scope of the splash pad. You know, I went into detail with him about that. And he says, you know, Mike, look at the splash pads at Kierland and at Scottsdale Quarter. Very simplistic, water. He says, you know, splash pad's a great idea. He didn't concur that we are on course for the only two options available for the town. That was not what he communicated. to me.
And, yeah.
That the fact that we were looking at doing things like that were positive. The amphitheater, the shading, he says, yeah, that's a great idea, but regarding the sound system and the lighting, it's not even addressed in his letter.
Well, you know, I don't think anybody around this table is talking about a water park. I think they're talking about a pretty simple splash pad.
We
And
allocated
what-
$350,000 for that.
Well,
I've seen the
the
conceptual drawings.
$350,000 was also including a refurbishing the fountain underneath the sundial.
And how much is allocated for that?
What was
Senior
that?
baggage.
Yeah, it was approximately $75,000.
55.
Yeah. And once again, when those budget figures were put together, and I think we're beating a dead horse here, they were budgeted for the very highest amount. So that when we look at our corporate partners, we can have a big picture of this is what we're shooting for, but most likely it will come well below that threshold. Every time that it was presented, by me, by Glenn, by Melissa, by others, we said this is high side. This is not something that we're looking at Wally World here. We're looking at something simplistic. But when you're putting budget numbers together, you obviously want to be conservative and aim at a higher side, a higher number rather than a lower number, and underestimate potentially some additional things that you can add to it in the future. So, you know, I think, you know, we were very conservative with our approach, but we're not looking at something that is in the scale of a aquatic center or a water park. When we sat down with Elliot, we talked about a multi-layered approach. And this is what the best practices are being utilized by these shopping centers, is outdoor centers are looking at creating an experience. And the experience is, it forms an indelible imprint on those people going and enjoying the outdoor spaces. And in the desert Southwest, by function, you look at shade, you look at water, you look at comfort. And those are the elements that we have integrated into our plan. And that plan is spelled out in the economic strategic plan that Melissa put forth to this council, and has posted on the website for the last 4 to 5 months. So all that was shared with Elliot, and he agreed that the approach of these investments is something that we strategically need to do. And Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was quote unquote, we need to do. We're positioning our infrastructure.
Jerry, let me just jump on that. You know, I think we're missing each other here somehow. I don't disagree that we should shade the amphitheater. I've been supportive of shading the amphitheater from the very beginning. The shading evolved into, let's now enhance the sound system, and now let's add lighting. When I spoke with Jim May, who used to hold the concerts up here,
Guys, I
Can
think
I,
what we ought
can
to
I,
do.
yeah, can I do a
Let's-
Marty?
why don't we just-
Get back to the other Land Institute.
well, just quickly, it goes to the scale. You know, originally we're looking at this. I just got to finish this. The splash pad was
No,
originally
we're looking
intended
at
to
the
be.
urban land
This is about urban.
I'm
you
sharing
guys-
with you the comments
But
that
you're
I
going-
had with Elliot Pollack, and I'm happy to bring him up here because he'll share the same things that we talked about on the phone.
Maybe not a bad thing.
Well,
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about the urban, that's what it's all about, the Urban Land Institute. What did they
Yeah.
say? What are they gonna do, or what are we gonna do?
well, why
That's
don't
what I
we hear
want.
from Melissa Price? What did you hear when you went to?
It's all up to you.
You didn't go to Elliot Park.
No, I didn't, but I read the letter, and I thought he was looking at our overall, from my understanding, viewpoint of what you gentlemen had shared with him that our plan was, and thought that we were on the right track, that we need a holistic look at our town center, and be bringing in amenities at various areas that are going to be attractive to visitors as well as businesses. When we visited ULI, I felt that, again, the same thing. They wanted to come in and look at the town center itself, not just the splash pad and the amphitheater, but look at it holistically and tell us what they felt. And maybe they would even come up with other ideas that they thought we should be, avenues they thought we should be going down. They did say that they would not be, they're not really Their job is not to really come out and say, okay, this is the ROI you're gonna get on this project. They don't do that. And they don't make decisions for us. And they made that very clear, we have to be the leaders. We have to make the decisions. They're just gonna make some recommendations.
And I completely agree, and because they have the expertise and the body of knowledge to make those recommendations. What we can decide as a council is how much we allocate for each one of these capital projects. My whole point from the beginning is, let's have a study done that identifies what the roadmap looks like, and if we're attracting the right people to our town. And Elliot made that point to me on the phone as well. He said, Mike, this letter is not a roadmap for you that I presented to the town. All I simply tried to communicate was, you're looking at the right ideas. You need to do an RFP and have a third-party independent study done on the town. None of us here collectively can pretend we know how to create economic development for the town.
You know, I beg to differ on that.
I do
You know,
too,
I've
Mike.
heard that before from you. I don't think anyone.
Glenn, you're a firefighter your whole life.
I was a firefighter, I was a business owner, I'm 62 years old, I learned a lot from other business people and all kinds of business.
You're telling me that you
I'm
have the
not a
experience
dummy.
as urban land institute.
You know what,
wherever they call
economic
it.
development is a lot of good common sense, and I've got that. So quit saying, you
Well,
want
I
to speak
think
for
that's the
yourself.
problem.
Mike,
That's the
Mike.
problem I
No,
have.
Mike,
Gentlemen,
I'm talking.
gentlemen,
If you
one
want to
person
speak
at a
for
time.
yourself, fine. Don't speak for the whole
I'm not,
council.
I'm speaking
None
for
of us
myself.
had the experience or the knowledge. I don't want to hear
You're
that.
gonna pretend that you do.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I've got quite a few accomplishments in my
Right.
life.
Okay, so how does the ULI concept that we had initially talked about a few months ago with president budget,
Yeah, the
how is that
original,
different from what
the
Mike
original
suggested?
question that we went down there with is, we'd like you to tell us if the splash pad improvements to the amphitheater are a good idea. And they kind of looked at it and said, we don't do those specific things. We do a larger scale thing called, and what they recommended to us was a technical assistance grant. They'll do that for $5,000, but they won't come in and make a recommendation, splash pad's a good idea, amphitheater, they won't do that. They'll basically come in and say, is your direction, overall direction right, and kind of help you decide, is your direction correct?
I'll do it for 35.
Well, and they also mentioned they would create maybe some other ideas that we haven't considered.
That's true. And I think I came out of that meeting, and the other three people who were there need to speak for themselves. I thought the technical assistance panel was a good idea for two reasons. Number one, it would validate or invalidate what we're doing. And two, it's an opportunity for us to network with people who come up here in that panel, because they bring developers up here who are working in the area. These are people from Arizona who are local, and they will get to know Carefree, and we may make some contacts by doing that. And the cost to do the TAP, Technical Assistance Panel, we would go for the $5,000 flavor. You can do a $7,500 or $10,000, but I think the $5,000 would suffice for us.